The night glittered with lights and laughter in Lagos. Powerful men and women filled the ballroom, glasses clinking, deals being whispered over champagne. Amina stood by Zuberi's side, dressed in a simple but elegant gown, her heart steady but her eyes watchful. She had supported him for years, standing quietly while he built his name. But that night, in front of investors and politicians, he turned on her. With a cruel smile, he leaned close enough for everyone to hear and said, "Too useless to keep." The room froze. Laughter turned into awkward silence. Faces turned away, pretending not to notice, though every ear had caught the sting in his words. Amina's chest burned as if fire lived under her skin. She wanted to shout, to break the glass in her hand, to ask how a man she had loved could reduce her to nothing in a single sentence. But she did not give him that satisfaction. Instead, she straightened her back, forced a calm smile, and walked away as though she had not been wounded at all. Each step was steady, but inside her heart was roaring. The crowd whispered behind her, some pitying, some smirking, all thinking she was finished. Zuberi raised his glass again, laughing loudly as though he had won. But Amina knew something no one in that room did. She carried a secret powerful enough to change her entire future. That night, while the world saw shame, she was already holding the beginning of her victory. What Zuberi did not know was that Amina had already prepared her answer long before that night in Lagos. Weeks earlier, while he was busy showing off at parties and chasing deals that never lasted, she had been quietly building something of her own. She had spent sleepless nights on video calls with executives in Johannesburg, fighting for every detail, proving her vision, and defending her ideas with calm confidence. And then, at last, they gave her the deal that would change everything. A contract worth $87 million. A number so big it could shake boardrooms and rewrite futures. She signed the papers with steady hands, but she did not run to celebrate. She kept it quiet. Not a whisper to her closest friends, not a word to her family. Even the women she trusted most did not know. Amina wanted her victory to arrive like thunder, loud, sudden, impossible to ignore. So when Zuberi called her useless, she bit back her rage and swallowed the hurt. She knew the truth. She knew that in just a few weeks, the entire continent would read her name and not his. She let him laugh that night, let him shine under the lights of Lagos, because she understood something he never did: silence can be the sharpest revenge. In her tiny Nairobi apartment, she kept the signed contract hidden in a folder on her desk. Every time she felt doubt creep in, she opened it and looked at the numbers, reminding herself what was coming. She imagined the headlines. She imagined the shock in his eyes when he realized the woman he had dismissed was building an empire right under his nose. The thought made her smile when she was alone, even through the ache in her chest. She didn't need to argue with him. She didn't need to shout her worth in crowded rooms. Her answer would not be in words but in results. And soon the world would see the kind of woman he had tried to break. For now, she carried her secret like a weapon hidden beneath her calm face. She went about her days as if nothing had changed, still walking through life quietly, still letting him believe he had won. But deep inside, she was waiting for the right moment. Waiting for the sun to rise on a morning that would belong to her. Because when the news broke, when her name spread across screens and newspapers, no one would remember his cruel words. They would only remember hers, unspoken, but written in the success she had built for herself. And Zuberi, the man who thought she was nothing, would finally understand what it meant to underestimate a woman who refused to stay broken. Amina was patient, and patience was her revenge. She was not chasing him anymore. She was chasing history, and history was almost within her hands. That night in Nairobi, Amina lay on her small bed staring at the cracked ceiling, her phone glowing faintly on the pillow beside her. Sleep refused to come. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard his voice again. Too useless to keep. The words echoed in her mind like a drumbeat, heavy and cruel. She replayed the moment in Lagos over and over, seeing his smirk, hearing the laughter of those who had watched her humiliation. Each syllable dug deeper, carving scars into her memory. She turned on her side, hugging her blanket tight, but the sting would not leave. She was tired, but her heart was wide awake, restless with pain and fire. Yet beneath the hurt, a different voice whispered. She remembered the folder on her desk, the signed contract with her name written boldly across the page. $87 million. A number so large it felt unreal, yet it was real, and it belonged to her. That paper was her shield, her sword, her answer to all the cruelty she had endured. As the city outside went quiet, Amina's chest rose and fell with a strange mix of fear and excitement. She knew the world had not seen her yet, but in just a few hours, the silence would break. She picked up her phone and scrolled through old messages from friends, people who had once doubted her, people who asked if she was wasting her time chasing dreams too big. She thought of her mother's voice telling her to keep fighting, to prove herself not with words but with action. And she smiled through her tears. For the first time since the gala, she felt stronger than her pain. The clock ticked past midnight, then 1, then 2. Still, she could not sleep. Her heart raced as if it already knew what was coming. She whispered to herself, by morning, they will all see. She imagined the headlines splashing across screens, her name shining in bold letters. She pictured Zuberi's face when he realized the woman he had mocked in public was the same woman now leading the biggest deal of the year. Her tiny apartment felt different that night. The peeling walls, the flickering bulb, the second-hand furniture, all of it seemed to glow with the secret she carried. It was no longer just a cramped room. It was the birthplace of a story that would echo far beyond those four walls. As dawn approached, Amina finally sat up, her eyes heavy but bright with determination. She had not slept, but she did not need to. The fire in her chest was enough to keep her awake. She opened her laptop, refreshed her inbox, and waited. The world was about to meet the woman Zuberi had called useless. And when they did, no one would ever use that word for her again. As the first light of sunrise touched Nairobi, the world began to shift for Amina. While the city yawned awake, phones across Africa lit up with breaking news. A single headline flashed everywhere: Kenyan entrepreneur Amina Kamau secures $87 million tech contract. It was bold, loud, and impossible to miss. Within minutes, the story spread like fire. News outlets in Johannesburg, Lagos, Accra, and even London carried her name. People who had never met her were suddenly saying it out loud, repeating it, tweeting it, posting it. Amina Kamau. The woman who had done what few thought possible. Her phone buzzed once. Then twice. Then it would not stop. Emails poured into her inbox so fast the notifications blurred together. Investors who had once ignored her now begged for meetings. Men who had laughed behind her back were suddenly calling her visionary. Companies that had closed their doors on her ideas now wanted to partner with her. The noise was overwhelming. The tiny apartment that had been quiet and lonely the night before now felt like the center of the world. Amina sat on her bed, clutching her phone, watching the flood of messages rise higher and higher. Then she opened Twitter and froze. Her name was trending. Not just in Kenya, not just in East Africa, but across the entire continent. And above it, right below her name, sat another trend, Zuberi's company. But his trend was different. Where hers was full of praise and admiration, his was full of questions, doubts, and criticism. People asked why he had not secured the deal himself. Others compared him to Amina, wondering aloud how he had overlooked the brilliance right beside him. Her hands trembled as she scrolled. The world had turned upside down in hours. Yesterday she was the woman whispered about in pity, the one who had been mocked and humiliated. Today she was the headline, the news, the proof that no insult could bury true worth. Her chest rose and fell as she realized the power of that moment. She had not spoken a single word in her own defense, but her success was speaking louder than anything she could have said. She leaned back against the wall, her phone still buzzing, her laptop screen filled with interview requests. Investors wanted her time. Young women sent her messages saying she inspired them. Former colleagues apologized, pretending they had always believed in her. The noise around her was dizzying, but in the middle of it, she felt calm. She had waited for this day, carried the secret through humiliation, and now it was here. Her eyes blurred with tears, but not of pain. These were tears of release, of triumph. She had been called too useless to keep, and now her name was brighter than the man who had said it. The entire continent was watching, and for the first time, they were watching her. By mid-morning, the shockwaves had reached Zuberi's office. His boardroom, once a place of pride and polished confidence, had turned into a storm. The directors argued over each other, their voices sharp and panicked. One reported that a major client had just cancelled a deal. Another said investors were withdrawing funds. Contracts that Zuberi had boasted about only days ago were suddenly falling apart, piece by piece, slipping through his hands like sand. And while his empire shook, the name they all whispered was Amina's. She was the new face of power, and no one wanted to be left behind. As calls came in, his phone buzzed with messages he wished he could ignore. Clients who once trusted him were now politely saying they preferred to align with Amina's company. Some were less polite, openly stating that she was the future and he was the past. Zuberi clenched his jaw, but there was nothing he could say to stop the wave. Every hour, her star rose higher, and his sank lower. Across the city, Amina's inbox overflowed. Former employees of Zuberi, people who had watched her be dismissed in meetings, people who had once laughed at her ideas, were now writing long emails begging for a chance to join her. They listed their skills, their experience, their loyalty, as if the past could be erased with desperate words. She read some of the messages with a quiet smile, remembering the faces of those who had once mocked her. Now those same men addressed her with respect, opening their letters with, "Dear Madam." That title spread quickly. Madam. It carried weight, honor, and recognition. In the same offices where she had been ignored, her name was now spoken with caution and reverence. Businessmen who used to wave away her opinions now stumbled over themselves to praise her. Politicians who had never taken her seriously now requested private meetings. The power had shifted completely, and everyone could feel it. Zuberi, once so sure of his untouchable position, found himself cornered. His pride, his reputation, his company, all of it was crumbling faster than he could rebuild. Every screen he looked at carried her name. Every conversation he overheard circled back to her success. His empire was no longer the one people admired. That honor belonged to Amina now. And she did not need to shout, or boast, or remind anyone of the past. She simply kept moving forward, accepting meetings, answering calls, signing more partnerships. Each signature she made on new contracts was another stone in the foundation of her rising empire. Each handshake was proof that she had become the force no one could ignore. By the time the sun began to set, one thing was clear, the balance of power had flipped. Amina, the woman once called useless, was now the one holding the future in her hands, while Zuberi struggled to hold on to the pieces of his fading empire. Zuberi could not take it anymore. The headlines, the lost clients, the endless talk of Amina's success, it all boiled inside him until he snapped. By the time his private jet touched down in Accra, his anger was louder than reason. He did not wait for an appointment, did not bother with politeness. He stormed into her new office, his footsteps heavy against the marble floor, his face twisted with panic and pride. The receptionist tried to stop him, but he shoved past, pushing the door open as if the empire inside still belonged to him. Amina was sitting at her desk, sunlight pouring through the tall windows behind her. The office was sleek, filled with quiet energy, the kind of space that spoke of growth and vision. She looked up slowly, her calm presence the opposite of his rage. Zuberi slammed the door shut and demanded answers. His voice was sharp, shaking with fear disguised as anger. How did you do this? Who is backing you? What game are you playing? His words fired out like bullets, but Amina did not flinch. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, her fingers lightly resting on the desk, her face composed. For a moment, she simply studied him, the same man who had once mocked her in front of the world, now standing desperate and cornered. Then, with a calm smile, she spoke. The woman you called useless built something you'll never control. The words hung in the air like thunder. Zubari's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His hands clenched into fists, then loosened again, as if searching for a reply that did not exist. The silence grew heavier, pressing into the walls, into his chest. It was louder than his insults had ever been, louder than the laughter he once enjoyed at her expense. For the first time, he understood the truth. He had underestimated her, dismissed her, humiliated her, and now she had built a future where he had no power. The room reminded him of that fact. Every polished surface, every stack of signed contracts, every ringing phone outside the office spoke of her success. And none of it was his. Amina did not raise her voice. She did not gloat. She simply returned to her papers, her attention no longer on him. That dismissal was sharper than any insult. To her, he was no longer a threat, no longer a partner, no longer relevant. He was just noise from a past she had already outgrown. Zubari stood there for a long moment, breathing heavily, searching for words he could not find. Finally, he turned and walked out, his footsteps slower than before. The door closed behind him, and the silence returned. But this time, the silence belonged to her. Amina exhaled softly, her calm smile still on her lips. The man who once called her useless had finally been silenced by her power. The world now had its eyes fixed on Amina. Every newspaper wanted her face on the front page, every television station wanted her voice, and every investor wanted her time. She had the kind of power most people only dreamed of, and with one simple decision, she could have destroyed Zubari completely. His company was already fragile, his reputation bleeding. One push from her and he would have collapsed for good. People expected her to take that step. Some even whispered that it would be justice for the humiliation he had thrown at her. But Amina's heart was not set on revenge. She had tasted the bitterness of being crushed, and she refused to become like him. Instead, she looked at the young women who began reaching out to her. Messages filled her inbox, girls from small towns in Kenya, in Ghana, in Nigeria, who said her story gave them courage. They told her they wanted to build, to lead, to dream, but no one took them seriously. Amina saw herself in every one of those messages. She remembered the sleepless nights, the slammed doors, the cruel laughter in meetings where her ideas were dismissed. And she knew then that her victory was not just about her. It was about all of them. So while the world waited for her to crush Zubari, she chose a different path. She launched programs to fund women-led startups, mentoring them, guiding them, opening doors that had been shut for generations. She created spaces where women could speak without being silenced, where their ideas were treated with respect, where failure was not an end but a lesson. She made sure the opportunities she never had would now exist for others. The shift was powerful. Soon, the headlines stopped being only about the $87 million contract. They began to call her a symbol of resilience, a leader of change, a woman rewriting the rules. Conferences invited her not just as a businesswoman, but as a voice of a movement. Her story traveled beyond Africa, inspiring women across the world who knew what it meant to be underestimated. Zubari watched all of this from the shadows. The empire he once ruled was shrinking, while hers was expanding in ways he had never imagined. But what stung him most was not his loss of power, it was that Amina had not even wasted her energy on him. She had lifted others instead of tearing him down, and that choice made her shine even brighter. Late at night, when Amina looked at her reflection, she saw not just the woman who survived humiliation but the woman who transformed it into hope for millions. She had been called useless, broken, weak. Now she was living proof that scars could be turned into strength. Her story had grown larger than her pain. It was no longer just her victory. It had become a movement that could not be stopped. Late at night, the city outside was quiet, but Amina's office was still alive with light. Papers lay across her desk, her phone buzzing every few minutes with new messages, new opportunities, new invitations. But she wasn't answering them. She sat back in her chair, scrolling slowly through the endless headlines on her screen. Her name was everywhere, shining brighter than she had ever imagined. Amina Kamau, the woman who changed the game. From mocked to millionaire. A symbol of resilience. Each headline felt unreal, as if they were about someone else. Her phone slipped from her hands and landed softly on the carpet. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the glowing screen in front of her. But these were not the tears of pain she had once swallowed in silence. They were tears of release, of gratitude, of triumph. She had survived the humiliation, the nights of doubt, the years of being told she was not enough. And now the world could no longer deny her. She thought back to that cruel night in Lagos, to the words that had cut her so deeply, too useless to keep. She had carried those words like a wound, heavy and sharp. But now, sitting alone in her office with the city lights stretching into the horizon, she realized those words had transformed her. They had pushed her to rise higher, to build stronger, to prove not just to him but to herself what she was capable of. It was not revenge that filled her heart. It was not even the millions in contracts. It was the truth that the girl who had once been dismissed as nothing had become the woman no one could ignore. And that was her mic drop moment.